Michelle. I am a career coach and resume writer and founder at WorkWonders Careers. And I'm here today to talk about how to know if your next job is the right job for you. So we spend a lot of time working with people to make strategic career moves, whether that's a transition or growth opportunity. And that requires that we be active participants in the job search. We be the choosers and really think about the opportunities and do our due diligence. So that's what I want to chat about today. If you are a job seeker or if you are a potential job seeker, I hope you'll stay and watch. If you're watching the replay, go ahead and fast forward a moment or two while I wait for people to gather. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. I'm thrilled you're here. We do these just about every week to offer actionable insight for job seekers and professionals and bring people together. And all of these resources that we do on these lives, that we offer on these lives, live here on LinkedIn. So you can access some of the highlights over on my profile and feel free to connect with me while you're here. I'm just going to give everyone a moment to arrive. We are also taking, I'm taking next week off. So there won't be a LinkedIn Live next week, but we'll be back the first week of August. And I think we're talking about exploring your career options. So if you haven't RSVP'd to that event, check it out over on the WorkWonders Careers LinkedIn page. All right, if you're here and watching, feel free to say hello and let me know where you're from. Today, we're going to talk about knowing how your next move is the right move for you. I want to thank everyone for being here and for your trust. As always, I know you take your career seriously, so it means a lot that you're tuning in to get some support from me and the team here. I also just want to say, let me just check my settings here. Oh, hey, Pamela, nice to see you. Hope you're well. My pleasure. Let me just pull my notes up. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated. Okay, so we're talking about how to know if your next move is the right move for you. And this is something that I see a lot of job seekers struggle with because a lot of job seekers enter into the process waiting to be chosen, waiting to be selected. And we at WorkWonders, we work almost exclusively with people who are making meaningful and impactful and strategic career changes. So, if you just need any job, you may not need our help, but people seek us out because we can help people make a strategic pivot or a change, or really think through what might be helpful to them. And that requires more than just being picked. In fact, sometimes being picked is the easy part, quite frankly. And so I want to share what it looks like when we encourage clients to really exercise agency, step into the power they have in this process, because when you're just sending out applications, it doesn't feel like a place of power. But I want to give you some alternatives here, because what you do in this process, 100% generates your results. And so if you want a better job that, where the culture aligns, where the role offers, opportunities to learn and grow and feel engaged and motivated, where the people, work for you, it's a positive team, where you have a boss that offers mentorship and support, or the compensation aligns with your needs, you have to be an active participant in the job search process. There's no other way around it. You have to make some strategic decisions. And that's been an even more consistent thread. People really trying to find needs and value aligned opportunities for the last 15 months as a result of really everything that's transpired. And I think we've all really seen that a lot of employees are in many ways kind of at the mercy of their employers. And so more and more, yes, I'm seeing clients just quit jobs before they have new ones lined up. I'm seeing them demand more from their employers to protect, the safety and well-being of the employees. And of course, they're looking for good places to work. So I want to talk a little bit about what that can and should really look like for you. And I'm going to try and do it, think about all stages of the job search process, right? So whether you are kind of exploratory or if you are actively applying, there's going to be something here for you today. And where I'll start us is in the preparation phase. And we call this the self-reflection phase. And if you're not new here, you probably have heard me say this is the step that most people skip, but we actually think is really most important. And one of the reasons it's most important is determining your needs and goals and values there's probably been an evolution over time about what you want to do and how you want to feel about doing it. And it's really important to spend some time getting clear about that, because a lot of times what the job search turns into is it's driven by what people believe that they can do. But we need to kind of expand that a little bit. So I want you to start by thinking, less of or more of. That's kind of a framework we use quite a bit around here. So think about your most recent job and what worked about it for you, or what's working about it. And would you want more of that? And start to write down, document this. It's a game changer. Don't keep it all in your head. What's working that you want to continue experiencing or having or using in your next job? And what do you want less of? So what are the dynamics or skills or responsibilities that you'd be happy to set free and never see again? This is going to look different for everyone, and it should. And this is why you kind of can't it's not going to help to look at what your neighbor's writing down on an assignment like this. It really needs to be something that reflects your goals. And so our clients kind of arrive at some of these pieces of clarity by really looking back over their career trajectory and seeing, what they've learned, what the transformative experiences have been, what they've learned that's kind of shifted their own goals or how their life is evolving, right? I mean, where we are at 22 is so different at 32 and 42 and 52. And what people are thinking about and what their life looks like are really, really different. So getting really clear on what you need your next job, to provide for you is actually a really important piece of career clarity, in my view. Another way to do this is to examine job postings and identify roles that excite you or intrigue you and that feel aligned with you. In fact, I encourage people to put the job search on pause for just a bit and really just look at job postings and try to figure out what is resonating and connecting with you, and see what the jobs that meet that level of criteria actually have in common. Because that is really what I consider career clarity, right? So there's usually something there about the skills and experiences you get to use, the things you're going to get to learn, and assumptions you're making based on, the company and what they're sharing about themselves that are compelling to you. You can identify that. And if you can identify that, rather, you have plenty of clarity for a job search. Oh, hello. I can see some additional people, Susan, Peter, Mary, Belinda. Belinda, I'm sorry. I don't know if anyone else is having trouble hearing me today. There's a lot of background noise outside, but I'm not sure if it's impacting whether or not people can hear me. So I've got my headset in. So in addition to kind of this piece, I'm a big fan of just doing some kind of basic research. So Glassdoor, we're probably all familiar with that. You can follow the company here on LinkedIn and really just sort of try to get a sense of what's going on behind the scenes. What are employees saying? What are you seeing that's compelling and or worrisome? I'm also a really big fan of having clients set up Google alerts for target companies, because a lot of what we consume as job seekers is marketing, employee marketing. So it's part of a very carefully crafted message and brand that professional marketers are rolling out. And sometimes that doesn't give us the full picture. I think that would be fair to say. So making sure that you set up some Google alerts so you can track other things that might be going on, journalism, what employees are doing or how they're feeling, I think can be really, really helpful. Another thing I've seen our clients do that I think is really helpful is actually reaching out to former employees or current employees of the team or companies that you're interested in. So this is something you could either do at the front end, in the exploration stage, or even as you're moving through the application and interview and negotiation process, is to hear from people who've been there. And that can help you offer tremendous insight on the dynamics and the work environment and the expectations and the culture. And, really what you're looking for here is are they doing what they say they're doing, right? You're looking for some kind of resonance there. You need to know what you want for yourself first and foremost. So how to make sure your next move is going to be the right move for you requires that you articulate that. That can feel really scary because a lot of times people struggle to think that there are good opportunities professionally out there for them. So I don't really want to minimize the fear people have around that. I think that's significant, and I think there's probably good reasons for it. But this is really less about whether the perfect job exists and more about what set of criteria is really more important to you going forward. We're not looking for perfect, we're looking for worthwhile and meaning and the potential to have a real positive impact. I can hear you fine. Okay, great. Awesome. No background noise. Okay, that's good because there are like horns and motorcycles. So I'm so glad y'all can't hear that. So the next part of the process, once we've done some self-reflection, is getting to the application stage. So I'm going to say this next line multiple times, like it's going to go on my headstone one day, but the job search itself is not an audition process. And I understand that it feels that way. And in some ways they are, kind of employers construct an audition environment, I think on purpose. But for job seekers, it's really important that we treat it like a conversation and an opportunity to learn more. And when people show up to interviews in full-on performance mode, like lines memorized, like fully prepped, oftentimes over-prepped, honestly, I think we miss a real opportunity, to see if there's any natural kind of connection or resonance between us and the hiring, team and stakeholders. And also to kind of like look for potential red flags, like to be a critical thinker in that moment. And so let me just offer some ways that in the application process, we can, turn off the audition switch and turn on the like active participant switch. You choose the jobs that you apply for, and you can choose to not apply for things that don't feel right or perfectly aligned. One of the ways this shows up for our clients, especially when they're trying to be consistent in their applications, they don't want to like rule out everything, right? They need to be creating some opportunities, is to like prioritize the jobs that you're applying for in any given week based on how well they align with your values and interests and goals. And to think ahead of time, like if you get a phone call for this role, or if you get a chance to interview, like what are the questions or concerns that you're going to want to hear about from the hiring manager? You can think about that in advance and then know that your application is only evidence of your desire to learn more, and it's not a commitment to the job at hand. I think this idea that people are applying and then they'll have to say yes if they get the job, or they will really want to say yes if they take the job, like that doesn't have to be the case. Like applications are really about saying, I'd love to have a conversation about this opportunity, and not just to position yourself strategically, but to listen and observe and watch. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next step. You also choose how to convey your value and your values along the way. If your values matter, consider revealing them. Like I remember when I graduated college and the career development office got a hold of my resume and they took off a whole bunch of like volunteer work that I'd done that, would kind of convey my social interests or my social justice interests. And in retrospect, I really wish I'd never taken that off. Like that is something that is so at the core of who I am. And I see so many clients remove things like that. Is it advantageous? No, not always. Is there a price to pay? Sometimes there is a price to pay. But also, if those things are so core to your being, that being in an environment that it has animosity to your deeply held values, like that could be not a great fit. So that could be a sign. And there are some people, don't get me wrong, like big firms, like where they sort of don't care about you as people at all. But if you are in a line of work where this feels like valuable volunteer experience, or it's simply paid experience because it's part of your career and you're trying to decide if it's holding you back, like think about, there's not just a cost to having it there. There's also a cost, I'll argue, to removing it and not revealing it. Another important thing to remember is, I see a good question here. Zora, a good question. I'm going to answer this in like 1 minute. I will talk about that. One thing as I wrap this up, you can withdraw at any point in the process. So please remember that. I think sometimes people get really nervous, but saying no, like my clients will tell you that saying no is just as important as, saying, yes, I'd like to proceed or go to the next round. And you can maintain relationships with recruiters and hiring stakeholders and still say no. Like I want you to know that it's normal for people to learn more about the role, get other offers, decide to stay where they are. And you can do that without burning bridges. And that's why I think a lot of people, prefer not to do this. Like if they just don't apply, then they won't have to say no if they're not ready to commit. But actually, as long as you are candid about what you're looking for and there's some like connection there, I think it's totally fine to withdraw at any point in the process. And many candidates do this. So just wanted to put that out there. So I want to talk in the next step here. Yeah, I think it might be Belinda. I'm sorry. There will be there's captions in the replay, so that might be helpful if you missed anything. So I want to talk about interviewing and negotiation and how to kind of integrate this, like how to find a job that's a great fit into that part of the process, right? And of course, the audition piece plays a role in here because nothing says audition like having an on-site or getting on camera. But you also need to think about what questions you need to be asking, how you're preparing, and what you're preparing for. Zoraida asked a really good question. I want to answer that in just a minute, but let me just give you one of the things Actually, let me start with a question. Let me see here. What does over preparing for the interview look like? It looks like being so focused on your own storytelling and your own desire to be concise and your own performance that you forget to listen and observe in the process, right? It's almost like you're just trying to like get all your lines out as fast as you can before you forget. And you are not really showing up as a full participant, because full participation in an interview requires you to listen and to observe. And to that point, I want to say, I think observation is a hugely underrated skill. And let me tell a little story, a little personal story here. I won't tell any client stories on this one, but something I pay attention to when I was applying for jobs, and in fact, when I was applying for my last job, I was getting emails asking I had applied for a job online, and all the emails I got came at like 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I knew for a fact, like, I'm not working in this place at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, right? But that's something I watched for and I paid attention to. And long story short, I did say yes to that job. But it's funny because like it really did, like my boss at the time like worked late into the evening. That was normal. And like there was always kind of a little bit of pressure to like hang back and work late and do that sort of thing, right? And so I knew that I had a side business that I was going to take on. So like I wasn't worried about committing to that dynamic long term, but I'm an early bird. So if anyone works with me, you know, like I'm up and working usually by 7 at the latest. And so I don't work at 7 o'clock at night if I can help it, because I've already been working for many hours. So that wouldn't have been like a long term successful environment for me. And so I just want you to think about what you're seeing and experiencing in the interview process. Like, for example, your interviewer should be prepared. They should be familiar with your resume and qualifications. And they should review this material rather in advance of the actual interview itself. You should feel welcomed. And I know that this is highly subjective, and some fields and roles and teams are like warmer than others, but I want you to know that even if you are not the final candidate, like you deserve to be treated with respect throughout the process. Like there's no excuse for that. This used to be my job. Like I used to organize day visits for faculty candidates. And even when, you know, we knew based on like earlier interviews, like this probably wasn't going to be the right person, it was still so important to us to treat that person well and make sure that they had a positive experience. So when I see things going sideways sometimes in interviews for my clients, like it's not because they didn't prepare. It's because they walked into a situation where other people were unprepared. You can also pay attention to how people handle challenging questions. Do they seem candid or aware, or do they seem defensive? I did have a very brave client ask about some things that were on Glassdoor, and that wasn't a deal breaker for her. I think you can probably find every organization has some unhappy people on Glassdoor, but the way they responded to the question ended up being the deal breaker. And so it can be very scary to ask about things like this, but I think it can be a real worthwhile step. You can just say, like, I'm really curious about how this incident has resolved itself, or what steps have been taken. It seems like a lot of people were upset about that. Is that still the case? That can be professional. It can be clear. It does not have to be rude at all. Doesn't mean people won't get defensive, but it's totally reasonable to ask about things that you may have concerns about. I also love to pay attention to how people interact with each other. Does the team look like they like each other? Do they talk about each other in flattering ways? Do they talk about their chemistry? That can be really important. And, the next piece here is like, you need to ask some questions. right? Like you need to be figuring out. So that's why that self-reflection that we do at the very first step, figuring out what our needs and priorities and goals are here, this is really what we ask about. People ask me all the time, what questions should I ask in my interview? And yeah, we can talk about questions you should ask. But what I always want to know is like, what are your actual questions? Like, what are the black boxes of this job that make you nervous? Or what are the red or yellow flags that you've seen so far that you want to explore? Not every flag is, means we're out of the rut, like we withdraw, but it does mean we maybe need to gather some more information. It also might mean we withdraw. I guess it depends on what the flag is and it's, how important it is to you. Some things that I personally always ask about, and this is not a conversation about like how to strategically position yourself. This is really about like, is this a healthy place that I want to be working? How would you describe the team's relationship with one another, like among the members of this team? What's your favorite part about working here? And what's the most challenging part about working here? Can you tell me how the organization has prioritized or addressed issues related to diversity, equity, inclusion, or belonging? And what sort of learning or mentorship opportunities have you taken advantage of here? Or you can say, what kind of those learning opportunities have you offered here? So I think it's really important. Those are the kinds of things that are always important to me. So it's important that you think about like what's important to you and find a way to ask about that. Okay, we have a question from Maxine. I have applied for a position that seems most ideal for me at director level. I am so excited about the position that I have set up a mock interview panel to prepare and get feedback. Your thoughts about doing this? Listen, I think the more you can practice, the better. And I don't consider something like this to be over preparation. So I'm not talking necessarily about the like level or intensity of preparation. I think the other thing, Maxine, I would consider is like, what would be challenging about this job? What resources do I need to be successful in this role? And what evidence do I have that I'll have access to those in this role? And how can I ask about the sorts of things? Like I would, always prepare for the conversation, but this is not where most of my clients fall short. Most of my clients fall short by not knowing how or fearing asking about things that really matter. So it's great that you have people in your network willing to do this. Are you in HR, Maxine? I feel like I remember that from another conversation. So I bet you do have good friends who can help you out here. So this is good, but just don't forget to listen and don't forget to observe and don't forget to kind of consider the pieces here that emerge from the conversation. Like, do you hear anything that is concerning to you or that you want to know more about? And that's where I think it can turn into overperformance if you are, no, you're not. Okay. If you're not, in a position to listen and you're just trying to get information out and share as much as possible. I think that that's when we've over-prepared and we're focusing on our performance, but not necessarily on the connection or resonance there. Higher ed. Okay. No, that will serve you well because higher ed has a complex hiring process sometimes. So mock panels can definitely be helpful. So let me do a last call for questions here. I want to talk about one other piece of the puzzle that actually came up in our community call last night. I got a question from one of our community members about, work is really stressful. It's hard to show up to interviews and feel like I can turn it on and deliver. And like, what strategies, do you suggest? And I happen to know that this person is someone who's a great interview and great at what they do. And so I wasn't really worried about the content, but, my suggestion was like, I don't know that this is about an interview strategy so much as this is about like a taking care of yourself during the job search strategy. Right. So many people start the job search because they're driven by a sense of urgency, whether you're between jobs or you're unhappy at work. Like it always, for most people, it really feels like something that has to happen quickly so that they can stop being unhappy in their current job. And that can become a real challenge in the job search process because, again, trying to find a job that is a meaningful career move is not like you snap your fingers and it happens for you. It requires bandwidth to do some self-reflection. It requires interviewing for jobs and having the runway to say no. And it can be really hard to be selective if you are like running on empty, right? And so when you are strategic in your job search process, you are no longer relying on the volume of applications to create your opportunities. The priorities that you set early on mean that you are relying on alignment, and that can free up a lot of your time. So for people who come to us already applying for jobs, what often happens is they apply to fewer jobs, because they're applying kind of all over the place and there's not a lot of like active selection. It's just like kind of a frantic, Hail Mary. And that's not really what we want for people. So when you are strategic and actively choosing and spending your time in a real like conscious way, you have time to rest, to go outside, to take breaks. And I find that is like a critical part of the process. Like people sometimes want to plan to do that, when their job search is over, when they have the new job, but starting a new job is stressful too. So even if it's better and you get to leave, the stress that you're going into a place where you're going to have to learn a lot of stuff rapidly. And even if everyone there is great, it's still like a pretty stressful time in people's lives. So find a way to give yourself a break. And I always like to say, we try to create more passive job seekers. Like we try to emphasize work-life balance and self-care while you're job searching so that you have a little bit more bandwidth. And what I actually find is that this also just helps people tolerate the challenging jobs when we're, in a pattern of like being miserable at work, and then we go home and we're just like zonked in front of the TV or scrolling Twitter or whatever it might be. That's not a very satisfying way to live. And I think that, we feel some kind of way about our job for forcing us into that lifestyle. And so when we can kind of reclaim some of that time, I think that helps people tolerate some difficult jobs for a little bit longer until they can really make a move that they are proud of. All right. Thank you all. I'm just making sure I didn't miss any comments. Feel free to drop any comments. Those are my tips for how to know if your next job is right for you. You have to ask, you have to choose, you have to select, you have to be willing to withdraw. There'll always be some unknowns. That's the other piece, right? So every successful job search is also a little bit of a leap of faith. But what I really like to tell people who are worried that they don't trust themselves to make a good decision is that when you learn to job search well, you will not ever feel quite so stuck in another job ever again. When you know how to use your resume, when you know how to have those relationships, when you're not afraid to create opportunities for yourself, the stuckness that you might feel right now, like doesn't have to happen down the road. Like you can always pick up and move on. And that's what I really like about this, right? Because you guys know I don't care about rules at all. Not a big rule fan, but I am a big fan of giving people tools to keep them mobile. That's fun. All right. Thank you, Shavette. Thank you, Maxine. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I'm on vacation next week, so you won't see me on LinkedIn Live, but I will be back the following week. I'll be talking about career exploration. I will also say, early in the fall, September 15th, we are relaunching our newsletter. So if you're not on our mailing list, head on over to workwonderscareers.com and hop on that. It's not just for job seekers. There's lots of good content over there. Otherwise, I will see you all in August. Thanks for joining me today. Have a good one.